Here's a comparison that gets interesting quickly because it starts with a problem. From a British perspective, most of what America calls old money isn't actually that old. The Boston Brahmins, the Cabots and Lowells and Adamses trace their wealth to the 17th and 18th centuries at most. The Devonshire family in England has been at Chatsworth since 1549. There are English aristocratic families whose position predates the printing press, the Reformation, and the existence of the United States by several centuries. This comparison isn't symmetric. You're comparing something that's been aging for 500 years with something relatively recent by historical standards. And yet that asymmetry is itself one of the most interesting things about it, because the American version of old money has developed very differently from the British one, with different strengths and different failure modes in ways that tell you a great deal about what old money actually is and what it's for. Number 1. The British system. Land, title, and the weight of history. The British old money system is, at its structural foundation, a land system. The English aristocracy derived its power and identity from land ownership, not just as an investment, but as the literal basis of social authority, of political representation in the House of Lords, of the tenant relationships that defined rural life for centuries. Land wasn't a portfolio allocation, it was the thing itself. This land foundation created a form of wealth and status that was, by design, extremely hard to dislodge. Primogeniture, the inheritance of the entire estate by the eldest son, rather than its division among heirs, kept aristocratic estates intact across generations in a way that more egalitarian traditions did not. Add to this the formal legal apparatus of hereditary titles, dukes, earls, viscounts, barons, which created a named, legally recognized social hierarchy that didn't depend on ongoing social recognition to be real. And you have a system that is, by almost any measure, the most durable form of upper-class social structure the Western world has ever produced. Some of the families at the top of it today can trace their titles to the Norman conquest of 1066. The cost has been significant. The maintenance burden is enormous. The country houses, the estates, the ancestral obligations, and the British aristocracy of the 20th century managed its money notoriously badly, selling off land, art, and property at a rate that would have horrified their great-grandparents. History, it turns out, has literal running costs. Number 2, the American system, social networks without the titles. American old money had to do the same social work, maintaining an elite class across generations, without any of the formal mechanisms that made British old money so structurally durable. No titles, no House of Lords, no legal recognition of hereditary aristocracy, since the Constitution explicitly prohibits the granting of titles of nobility. What replaced the titles was the social network. The social register, introduced in 1886, became the American equivalent of Debrett's peerage, a documented list of families whose position was recognized not by law, but by collective social agreement. The Ivy League universities produced the specific social connections that constituted belonging, and the private clubs of the Northeast served as gathering grounds for a class that couldn't hold its position through titles, and so had to hold it through constant social maintenance. The result was a form of old money that was more socially active and ultimately more fragile than its British counterpart, because anything maintained by social agreement can be unmaintained by the same mechanism, while a hereditary title, once granted, requires an act of parliament to remove. American old money families that stopped participating could find themselves quietly excluded within a generation in a way that simply doesn't happen when your position is documented in Burke's peerage. Number 3. What the British system gets better. The British old money system does durability better than anything else in the Western tradition. When it works, when the family manages to navigate the inheritance taxes, maintain the estate, and avoid the catastrophic financial decisions that consumed so many aristocratic fortunes, it produces a genuinely multi-generational social position in a way almost nothing else achieves. The social recognition doesn't require active maintenance. It's embedded in a formal structure that outlasts the individuals who inhabit it. The British system also does cultural capital better. The specific education, the manners, the accent, the ease in certain rooms, all the things we talked about in our Manners Gap video are more thoroughly embedded in the British upper-class childhood than in the American equivalent, because the British system has had more time to develop them, and the formal institutions that transmit them have been doing so for longer. It also does understatement better. The British tradition of not talking about money, not performing wealth, not participating in conspicuous consumption is more deeply culturally embedded than its American equivalent. And financial understatement, as we've discussed, is not just a social habit, but a genuine wealth preservation tool. Number 4, what the American system gets better. American old money is considerably more adaptable than its British counterpart, and that adaptability matters enormously for long-term financial outcomes. The British aristocratic tradition was historically resistant to what it considered trade. British old money families that needed to replenish their fortunes in the 19th century often did so by marrying American heiresses rather than going into business themselves. The pattern Henry James and Edith Wharton chronicled so carefully, because participation in commerce was seen as socially degrading in a way American wealth culture simply never internalized. American old money has been far more willing to diversify, invest professionally, and engage with financial markets in ways that have preserved and grown the underlying wealth. The Boston Brahmin tradition of professional involvement, the lawyer managing family trusts, the banker sitting on multiple boards, has produced better long-term financial outcomes than the British tradition of leaving financial management to factors and solicitors while the family concerned itself with other things. American old money is also more philanthropically productive. Endowed universities and funded foundations have created more durable institutions than British old money's historically more personal and less institutional giving tradition. Number 5, the answer and what it tells you. Which is better? If you're measuring by durability of social position, the British system wins. There is simply nothing in the American tradition that competes with 5 centuries of titled, documented, legally recognized upper-class membership. If you're measuring by financial management and adaptability, the American system wins. It has preserved and grown its underlying wealth more consistently because it never had the cultural objections to active wealth management that hampered British aristocratic financial behavior for most of the last 2 centuries. But here's the more useful observation. The 2 systems have been converging for most of the past century. British old money has become considerably more financially sophisticated, more conscious of the need to generate income from assets rather than simply owning them. American old money has become more culturally established, more institutionally embedded. The best examples of each tradition now look considerably more like the best examples of the other than either would have recognized in 1900. What they share, and what explains the durability of both, is institutional investment combined with financial patience, the willingness to put money into things that take generations to produce returns. That's not a British habit or an American one. It's what multi-generational wealth looks like when it's working. The more useful takeaway is what this comparison reveals about the conditions under which wealth actually persists across time. The British system uses formal institutional structure to hold social position even when financial management falters. The American system uses financial sophistication to hold wealth even when formal structure is absent. The families that have done best on both sides tend to have borrowed from both the British patience and the American adaptability, the long time horizon and the active financial management. There's no monopoly on that combination and no requirement that you inherit it. You can build it, 1 generation at a time, starting from exactly where you are. If this gave you a new way of thinking about what makes wealth last across generations, hit the like button and share it. Subscribe if you are new, and with that said, have a great day and see you in the next one.